What if I told you the world's biggest companies aren't betting on the US anymore? In the past year, something has shifted. Trade wars, supply chain shocks, and political fights keep rattling global markets, but Canada is quietly becoming the new safe haven for multinationals. This isn't just boardroom drama, it's a trend that threatens jobs on both sides of the border and signals trouble for entire industries. The proof? 5 massive corporations, some American, some global, are putting down billion-dollar roots north of the border. This isn't luck, it's a calculated move. Up first, a legacy automaker you thought was all American. Ford's move in Canada is all about the Oakville Assembly Complex. The company had announced a $2.3 billion investment to retool the plant, and the original plan was to build electric vehicles there, with 3-row electric SUVs scheduled for 2025. But things changed. Ford delayed those EV launches to 2027, citing the need to wait until the next generation of EVs can actually turn a profit. Instead, Oakville will pivot to producing gasoline-powered Super Duty pickup trucks starting in 2026. That's not just a line change. It's a signal that Ford is following the money, not the headlines. Demand for Super Duty trucks remains high, and Ford's U.S. plants in Kentucky and Ohio can't keep up. Oakville gives Ford another production line for its most profitable vehicles, and it does so without the headaches of U.S. labor negotiations or shifting federal subsidies. CEO Jim Farley has made it clear, the Super Duty is essential for Ford's bottom line and for the businesses that rely on it. Ford's commercial division, which sells these trucks, pulled in nearly 17% operating profit margins last quarter. Meanwhile, the EV division lost $4.7 billion last year and is on track to lose even more this year. Canada offers Ford some advantages the US can't. Ontario's established auto supply chain, stable energy costs, and predictable trade policy make it an attractive place to invest. When Ontario and Quebec paused EV rebates in early 2025, Tesla deliveries in Quebec dropped sharply, according to recent reports. Ford saw the writing on the wall and decided hybrids and trucks were the safer bet while the EV market sorts itself out. The company is now promising hybrid versions of every Ford Blue model in North America by the end of the decade. Ford's total investment in Canada is hitting $3 billion when you include supporting facilities. That secures about 1,800 jobs at Oakville and another 220 at engine and component plants, jobs that looked shaky just months ago. It's a hedge. If EV demand rebounds, Ford can flip Oakville back to electric production. If not, they're covered with hybrids and trucks. Ford's also pushing into software services for its commercial customers, looking for new profit streams while the EV market stalls. Canada's stability lets Ford regroup and ride out the uncertainty, and it keeps the country's auto sector in the game. But Ford's not the only multinational making this calculation. Next up, a tech giant betting on Canadian talent instead of Silicon Valley. Google's DeepMind operation set up its AI research hub in Toronto, running critical development from office towers in the city's downtown. This wasn't about prestige or branding. It's a strategic response to the tightening grip of US export controls on AI technology, which have been driving top researchers out of Silicon Valley. Canada gives Google a way around that. The Global Talent Stream program lets Google fast-track visas for tech workers in as little as 2 weeks. That's a pipeline the US can't match. And it's one of the reasons Google's AI teams are swelling north of the border. Montreal's Mila Institute is the backbone of this pipeline. It isn't just a university lab, it's a direct feeder for Google's AI projects. About half of Mila's PhD students get job offers from tech firms before they even finish their degrees, and Google is the top recruiter. Toronto and Montreal now rank as the world's leading AI research hubs after Silicon Valley, and that's not a fluke. The close connection between industry and academia means Google can snap up talent the second it's available. Inside Google, Internal maps suggest a majority of its Gemini AI compute operations now run through Canadian data centers. The logic is simple. Data stored on Canadian soil isn't as easily accessible to US regulators. Canada doesn't have anything like the US Cloud Act, which lets American authorities demand access to data held anywhere by US companies. That gives Google more freedom to experiment and move fast without Washington looking over its shoulder. Canada's status as a neutral ground in the US-China tech standoff is another advantage. The Montreal-Toronto corridor lets Google operate with fewer geopolitical headaches. Canadian export rules are looser than what's enforced in the US, so Google can collaborate with global teams and avoid the direct line of sight from American regulators. Chinese nationals make up a huge portion of Mila's international students, and many of them stay in Canada after graduation, feeding right back into the local tech ecosystem. The Canadian government is fully aware of what's happening. Ottawa's pan-Canadian AI strategy has poured $125 million into research institutes like Mila since 2017, and the incentives keep coming. That's why Google signed a 10-year lease at Toronto's Waterfront Innovation Centre in 2023. They're building a private network with direct fiber links to data centers in Montreal and Quebec City, keeping everything under Canadian jurisdiction. So far, Washington hasn't moved to close the loophole. The White House is pressuring Ottawa to tighten export controls, but Canada isn't moving quickly. Every month that goes by, Google locks in more infrastructure and talent. You see the same pattern in other industries. The next big multinational to make this bet is Pfizer, and they're not just putting up a building, they're digging in, literally. Pfizer's $1.2 billion investment in Montreal is about more than just making vaccines. The company is building a next-generation mRNA manufacturing facility designed for long-term global supply, and it's doing it in Quebec for some very specific reasons. Canada's regulatory environment is a big part of the draw. During the COVID crisis, Health Canada cleared booster shots in just 6 weeks, while the US FDA process dragged out for 14 months on average. That kind of speed isn't just a nice to have, it's a competitive edge when viruses mutate faster than bureaucracies can keep up. Pfizer's strategy here is clear. Diversify production away from the US and insulate itself from export bans, supply chain shocks, and the kind of political drama that threatened the industry during the pandemic. In the US, there were talks of overriding vaccine patents, but Canada opted for negotiation instead of threats. That approach gives companies like Pfizer more certainty. On top of that, the Montreal plant is built to churn out up to 100 million doses a month, making it one of the largest mRNA facilities anywhere. The site is engineered for rapid retooling, so it can shift to new vaccine formulas in under 30 days if needed. Montreal's port is another key factor. It's equipped to handle ultra-cold shipments without bottlenecks, and Quebec's hydroelectric grid offers stable, reliable power, something Pfizer's US plant struggled with during heat waves and grid failures. The facility's ownership structure is also calculated to reduce risk. Pfizer operates the plant, but the land is owned by Quebec's pension fund. That makes any government attempt to seize the facility politically toxic, since it would mean targeting retirees' savings. Pfizer is also taking full advantage of Canada's talent pipeline. 40% of McGill's life sciences graduate students are international, many from countries that face US visa hurdles. Pfizer hires them directly, using Canada's global talent stream to get work permits approved in about 10 days. That keeps the talent flowing without waiting for US immigration reform. The real win for Pfizer is stability. Quebec's health plan signs 5-year purchase agreements, so Pfizer isn't guessing about revenue. Canada's patent laws are weaker than in the US, which means Pfizer can tweak old drugs like Paxlovid into new formulas and get them approved faster. Biotech isn't the only industry thinking this way. As the global energy transition heats up, battery makers are looking for the same kind of stability and supply chain security. That brings us to Northvolt and a very different kind of bet on Quebec. Northvolt is building a massive electric vehicle battery plant in Quebec, and the reasons for picking this spot are clear. The company looked at locations in the US, including Arizona, but backed off after seeing repeated power grid failures and unpredictable energy costs. Quebec's state-owned hydro utility stepped in with something the US couldn't match: 20 years of guaranteed affordable hydroelectric power. That kind of stability is rare in North America. Battery manufacturing eats up a huge amount of electricity, and even small fluctuations in supply or price can wipe out profits. Quebec's grid has a track record of near-perfect uptime, and that reliability lets Northvolt run continuous production without worrying about blackouts or surprise bills. The supply chain is just as important. Northvolt locked in long-term deals with Quebec's critical mineral suppliers, many of them backed by government and indigenous partnerships. These agreements ensure a steady flow of lithium, nickel, and cobalt, and they're structured to share profits with local communities while meeting strict environmental standards. The result is a supply chain that's both stable and politically insulated, which is something US rivals can't guarantee. The factory itself is set up to produce batteries at a huge scale, following the gigafactory model that Tesla made famous, but with a twist. Quebec's cold climate lets Northvolt cut energy use by relying on outside air for much of its cooling. That means lower costs and fewer production risks compared to plants in hotter regions. The plant is designed to deliver 60 gigawatt hours of batteries a year by 2030, enough for hundreds of thousands of electric vehicles. There's also a trade advantage. Northvolt structured its supply chain under USMCA rules, so every battery sent to the US sidesteps Section 301 tariffs. That saves about $4,200 per battery, making Canadian-made cells far more competitive in the American market. The company's logistics are built around this: raw materials sourced and processed in Canada, final assembly in Ontario, then shipped south as North American products. Hydro-Quebec isn't just supplying power, they took a 15% equity stake in the project. That means Northvolt gets priority access to energy, even if shortages hit. It's a level of alignment between utility and manufacturer that you don't see in the US. Northvolt also invested in local workforce training, partnering with Quebec colleges to create battery technician programs. The first graduates are already lined up to start, earning wages well above the regional average. The plant's proximity to Montreal's international airport isn't an accident either. Northvolt secured dedicated cargo slots for fast battery shipments to Detroit and Europe. While US policymakers talk about energy security and supply chains, Northvolt is already operating with both. The playbook is straightforward: lock in power, minerals, and logistics, then use every rule to your advantage. That approach is spreading. Up next, how a logistics giant rewrote cross-border shipping using similar loopholes. Amazon's logistics network in Canada is more than just a way to serve Canadian customers. The company has put hundreds of millions into robotics-driven fulfillment centers like YXX1 in Pitt Meadows, British Columbia, an 825,000 square foot facility built for scale. These sites don't just move goods, they reshape how cross-border shipping works. A significant share of packages processed at Canadian hubs end up heading to the US, sometimes even surpassing the volume handled by Amazon's main Seattle hub. The YXX1 facility, with its non-stop AI-powered sorting systems, handles millions of items and keeps shipments flowing around the clock. This isn't about chasing faster delivery for Canadians. Amazon is building a logistics network that sidesteps US trade headaches. By assembling and sorting inventory in Canada, then shipping US-bound packages from Canadian soil, Amazon can dodge Section 301 tariffs on Chinese goods. Canadian stamped shipments face fewer inspections, lower fees, and less regulatory friction under USMCA rules. The company's new mega hubs in Ontario, Windsor, Richmond Hill, Ottawa, and others are all strategically placed for easy cross-border moves. The Cornwall hub, for example, sits just over an hour from New York State, making it a perfect launch pad for US deliveries. Amazon's expansion in Canada isn't just about geography, it's about incentives. Ontario's tax breaks offer about 0.85 back for every dollar spent on infrastructure, double what some US states can manage. The Green Commercial Vehicle Program gives Amazon an 86% write-off on each electric delivery van, something the US hasn't matched on a large scale. Amazon also uses Canada's global talent stream to bring in engineers and logistics specialists in as little as 10 days, filling automation roles that would be stuck in US visa limbo for months. What you're seeing is a logistics empire that uses Canada as a launch pad, not only to reach Canadian buyers, but to insulate itself from US trade policy and regulatory chaos. When logistics giants can sidestep US trade rules like this, it signals a broader corporate migration north. Corporate headquarters might still list Delaware, but the real action, the research labs, the battery plants, the logistics hubs is moving north. The shift is happening for a reason. Canada's steady rules, reliable power, and clear incentives are winning out over US uncertainty. If these corporations won't bet on America's stability, can our leaders afford to ignore it any longer? Let me know in the comments if you've seen new factories or labs open in your area, or if you've noticed more Ontario plates in your neighborhood. If this video gave you a new perspective, share it with someone who should see what's really happening.